How's this working? So we're zooming through you to, that's fine. I'm going to try and keep this really short because these news things tend to go on for a long time, but we've got a few presenters today, so I might have a longer one next month. Should we do the, we'll do it after this one. Yeah. So usual links, they're there for people to look at. They're, I've got to change some of them actually this month, and we'll go into that in a second, but the Slack one is no longer valid because we're now using Discord, and we'll talk about that in a second. The sponsor link is absolutely still valid, and I think we're around the 5K mark, which is, I think we dropped below it for a little bit, and now we're back up again. So please, if you can, sponsor. Another quick shout out to Barry again, tidied up all the videos and published them for me, which was wonderful. Really appreciate that, Barry. I should also mention that there's a blog that we keep track of, mostly for posterity, which links to all the videos. So for each of the meetups, we can have a record of what was discussed. I haven't done it for the last month. The videos have been posted there on my YouTube channel. We'll share those links if it's not obvious where that is. And I will get onto a blog post for last month's and tonight's. It's just a matter of collecting all those links. Headlines. Jim's going to talk about the MicroPython activity, but I thought it was worth mentioning that there's been over 70 PRs merged since the last meetup. So there's been a lot of activity. Those 70 PRs, that's not just commits, that's a whole bunch of work for each one of those that has made it into mainline. So there's a lot going on. I'm not sure if we'll hear from Damien or Jim to commit to a date, but I think we're getting pretty closer, or getting close to another MicroPython release, probably before the next. I'm looking at Damien while this is going on. Probably before the next meetup. Maybe. Okay. I'll take it. It's interesting that the last release of MicroPython was just before the RP 2040. So, sorry, the PKW, I should say. So we're looking to have the next release be the first PKW release. We mentioned last month that there was a discussion about moving from Slack to Discord. As I mentioned, that has now happened, as you're probably all aware. A bit more than that is we've tried to consolidate all the communications channels in general. So there's a bit of history here. The project's been going on for a while. So we've gone from IRC to Slack to Discord. We're going to stick at Discord for at least a little while. The wiki has gone full circle. It started off on GitHub, went via Golem, then via MediaWiki briefly, and now back to GitHub Wiki, since GitHub Wiki is convenient and it's actually pretty good these days. So Jim moved across most of the useful pages, but we're still trying to consolidate some of the useful stuff from the old wikis into the GitHub Wiki. But feel free to contribute there. It's a pretty good system. And the forum has also moved. So the old PHP BB forum that served us well for many years has now moved across to GitHub discussions, and I think it's been a real success story. There's been a lot of activity there. Yeah, so go check that out. And of course, all development goes through GitHub. So most things now just GitHub, and we've got Discord for real-time chat. Picom. So we've talked about Picom in the past. So a company was built around devices that were powered by MicroPython. They've gone into receivership, so in the administration. So it's a bit sad to see, but also not completely surprising. They had a lot of issues with delivering devices. They also were possibly caught with some bad timing. They moved from a product that was driven by ESP32s and shifted across and bet the farm on STM32s right when they were getting really hard to purchase. So there were other issues. I always had problems dealing with Picom. They had insisted on a licensing change for MicroPython, which didn't suit us in general as developers. And they also had trouble sort of supporting devices. I think they were a victim of their own success initially. But yeah, anyway, it's sad, still sad to see. But we might pass the hat around and see what we can buy out of the remains of them. I don't think they've relicensed the source. It's going to be very difficult to relicense a GPL. Is there?
Well,
for the Wi-Fi? Yeah, right. Yep. So well, it was their business really. So yeah, perhaps those wireless drivers would be useful to have. We should chase that. I haven't had a lot of hardware this month. We did talk about the Lumos S3 boards last month, and I managed to get them a week or two ago. I won't go into those details, but it was good to see MicroPython installed on them when they arrived. I also noticed that they had a board definition that they pulled down and they put a new one up. So that one's looking pretty close to going as well. So currently they're building it themselves and deploying it on the device. But we must are trying to work upstream as well. So that's great to see. Hardware news, we've got the Pio One. It was a cute little device. But I'm sure I'm going to mess up his name, but Gherkin Dogan built the Pio One. It was a Kickstarter a year or so ago. Tiny little thing, powered by an ESP32C3 with a little 1-inch display, or a little less than 1-inch display. He's packed a lot of stuff into that, and they're about $40 US. He has a really active Discord channel, and a couple of people have asked for MicroPython, so I don't see why it couldn't be packaged pretty readily, actually. The generic build, as one of the readers on Discord mentioned, does work straight out of the box. It's just a matter of packaging some peripheral drivers, really. M5 stack, as usual, they're pushing out stuff. These are the two most useful things that I saw them deliver in the last month. The CO2 unit, if you're looking for, which is all hot, of course, because of COVID, but it's been really hard to buy these devices. So they've got like a nice little packaged SCD40, which is a pretty popular little sensor there. And the thermal camera is a really interesting one. It's, I think I missed the price there, but it's about $70 or maybe a little bit more. But it uses a pretty interesting thermal sensor, and it has an ESP32 on board on the actual peripheral, which provides an I2C interface that you can request, like a little bitmap which shows the thermal properties of whatever you're pointing the camera at. But it does also indicate that you can reprogram that ESP32, so it's an interesting little device. The Electron's stamp console, it's another one of these little handheld devices, not as fancy as Pimoroni's. I'm sure you'll be happy to hear, Phil. But yeah, nice little thing, costs $16. So, great. I've got some others that I'll drop into a browser and show off because there's no time to write them up. Sec. An awful lot of tabs open at the moment. This is what you guys do to me. We've got the Beetle RP 2040. It's another one of these tiny little RP 2040 devices. This one's kind of designed, or I guess the selling point here is having large pads for beginners to solder onto. So if that's appealing to you, that's quite a neat little device. The Banana Pie BPI Pico WS3. Now this was an interesting one because Banana Pie just released an S3 board, which was a little bit larger than this. And they've decided to do, as far as I can tell, it's very similar to the board they released recently, with the difference that it's pin compatible with the Raspberry Pi Pico W, except it's not quite pin compatible. So I think they're trying to leverage some of the places where you might use a Pico W, you might choose to use one of these instead and get the benefits of if the S3 is appealing to you. SparkFun have a couple of interesting devices out, the DA16200, which is one of those Realtek chips. So we don't have MicroPython support for this yet, but at least not official support. But Amoeba are working on this, to continue to work on it. So it'll be interesting if we can get support for that at some point. The compelling feature there, of course, is the dual band Wi-Fi. Roundy Pi is pretty interesting too. They've actually got a couple of different models. This is one that's most interesting to me because it's an RP 2040 powering a little round display. Those round displays seem to be getting popular. The BS3 is another cheap ESP32S3 board. One of the key things they're advertising is that it's pretty low power. I'm not sure what they've done, or if they've done anything to make it low power, or just use the S3 module. But is the selling pitch. An Avi, I'm sure, have released a range of macro pads. These are running CircuitPython or Arduino at the moment. But if we can get the USB HID stuff sorted out, Damien, this will be a compelling product there. 3 different products. I can't remember the price range, but they go increasingly up from right to left. So rotary dials with push buttons and a keypad as well. And Lily Go had a, I don't know if the sound will come through, but they're another one that's got these round displays. Wow. But yeah, so they're also making one of these devices. This Ventilator, I'm sure that's not his real name, but he has released this library for MicroPython, which has PIO code to drive stepper motors, which is really good use for PIO because the accurate timing is really helpful there. So I thought that was a good library to keep an eye on. It's released on GitHub, open source license. I need to talk about the Tarot badge, which Kevin Thomas, who's pretty active in the MicroPython community, was the main developer of. He's part of DC 540, which is a DEF CON group in Virginia. And they were developing this to show off at DEF CON 22. And it's a pretty fancy device. I can't remember the specs off the top of my head. It's ESP based, reasonably good display, really fancy segment down the bottom here. So there's 12 LEDs on the outer ring and 12 on the inner ring. And they can light up for various reasons. The concept here, I don't think it was Kevin's, but the concept was that you could use this device to do tarot readings for people. And it has like a whole database of cards that you can choose from. It's got some really nice animations. So they spent some time sort of making the display work pretty effectively. Pretty flashy and pretty impressive. It's a nice little badge. You can pick one up for $75 US. There's not a lot of them, so you need to be quick. But Kevin has been really interesting, and I thought this quote was interesting too. So people were so blown away by all that the badge can do, and then asked how you can do it, and he was proud to say MicroPython. It's kind of nice. Nice to hear. Hybrix have been pretty busy. We covered them last month because of the beta release of their system. But Lauren's released this animation of this self-balancing bot using Lego Mindstorms running Hybrix, and it's running on this ball, and it's just got a couple of motors with a balancing bar on the back of it. It just looks really cool. And so apparently instructions and code are coming soon, and I pinged him about it. And then straight back, he came back and sent this one, which was an earlier model, which is the 2-reel bots. So it's kind of like a one-dimensional version of that. But it's a self-balancing bot. He sent through the code for this as well. 64 lines long, and that follows the line, balances the bot, and drives around in circles. And there's a video of this as well. You can see it running around and around that loop forever. And yeah, you sort of said in the bottom here, you'll notice there's a weight in the balancing loop because there's just tons of time to spare. Yeah, he didn't know what to do with all the processing power. So it was pretty cool stuff. Braden Lane, I came across Braden's work. He's been in the Adafruit community a fair bit, and all of his devices have Arduino and CircuitPython. He's quite a keen CircuitPython supporter, but all of his devices could run MicroPython. He's just been more exposed to CircuitPython. So I thought it'd be worth having a quick look at what he's been doing. The Lumos Stick was the first one. This is only, it looks much bigger on screen than it is. It's only 18 centimeters long, or wide, I should say. Driven by an ESP32S2, and it's literally just one of the Lumos boards soldered on the back. A couple of switches and a speaker, and you can drive a whole bunch of LEDs in pretty fancy sort of ways. Interestingly, he's got a GPIO line for each of the rows here, so you can parallelize the animations to do things a bit faster. He's got some good CircuitPython demos, but MicroPython will definitely work on this. 75 US will get you one of those. And then when I looked at that, he had other things as well, like the Joypad, another one of these keypads with some other stuff. useful addition to a computer. The other one that I really liked was the Lumos Ring, which is basically the same hardware as the Lumos Stick, but wrapped around in a circle. And you can see it's a pretty neat way to do a temperature display. Yeah, that was cute. And he's also building a reflow hot plate. So it's a device that will help you reflow your soldering jobs. And of course, he's used one of the Lumos sticks to interface to it. There's a couple of buttons here to drive the basic interface. So yeah, go check out what Braden's doing. He's doing some really interesting work. Final thoughts. It's generally nice to share these kinds of things about people really enjoying using MicroPython. So this one was really good. Someone who possibly wouldn't have even gotten into embedded development. So that was good to hear. Oh, interesting. So it's gone. Kevin, I picked up this tweet that you did the other day about MicroPython firmware. If it was put on a floppy disk, would take up most of the disk. I kind of looked at it the other way. I thought, if we had a floppy disk, we could fit MicroPython on it. That's amazing.
Exactly.
Yeah. So all we need to do now, right, is do a floppy drive interface, which CircuitPython has done. But if we get it to boot from floppy, that'd be kind of cool. Actually, so there's a side project for someone if they want to do it. Someone has found this. I don't know where they got this sort of stock photo from, with parents showing a baby on HTML for babies, and someone had chimed in saying, yeah, next up's MicroPython. So that's pretty fun. And that is about all I had for you. There's a couple of little also-rans. There's an SSH server that I think that's his name, yeah, Lars H has put together. I haven't gotten to the bottom of this. It's not fully implemented, but it will allow SSH connections as long as they're unauthenticated at the moment, I think. But it's all written in MicroPython, so I thought that was an interesting project to keep an eye on. DIY Electro Music does amazing things with MIDI. This particular project was a MIDI in splitter, so it takes MIDI in and splits it out to 8 I/O. Each one of them uses a PIO, so it keeps up the real-time output. Yeah, he's doing just amazing things with MIDI. It's really interesting to keep an eye on. The Pico satellite project, Niall Smith, is that his name? Yeah. This was really cool. Like, that doesn't look like you're trying to decipher what's going on there, but it's actually a world map, and it can show when space stations are going across the screen. So this is like you can just sort of make out the continents and everything, and the red dot can show a space station. It's inspired by another project who someone did something similar. That was very cool. And Geek Mum projects. It's a CircuitPython one, but so if we can play this. This is one of these orbs that have gotten quite popular to do. The thing I liked about this is that all the 3D prints are sort of available, so you can sort of build this yourself conceptually, whereas a lot of the other ones I've seen require FPGA work and fairly difficult electronics. This actually looks like it's really achievable for a DIY. It looks really cool. So stop that there. And that is me done for this month. I have a list of about another 60 or 70 tabs that I need to collate, but I'm afraid you'll have to wait till next month. Yeah. Andy, you had a question about the PyMaker extension. Don't know. I believe PyMaker was released under an open source license, so it's probably out there for anyone to use. It's an ESP32. Yeah. It is interesting, Kevin, that they've called it a PKW when it's an ESP32. I guess this is in reference to the Banana Pi device. Pico is kind of the layout, the board, so it kind of makes some sense, kind of it's akin to the Feather, I guess, name. Yeah, but it's just, I think it's very confusing, the way they've released that Banana Pi device. And yeah, I think everyone's a big fan of Pi, which is amazing. Okay. Well, were there any other questions about any of that? No. Good. Has anyone heard from Jim?